Hey friends, so a question I get a lot: is lo-fi hip-hop licensable? The answer to that question isn't exactly straightforward because it largely depends on who your target audience is, but furthermore, what stylistic choices you're making with your productions. The simple answer is yes, lo-fi hip-hop is licensable and it accounts for a huge portion of my own royalties. But we have to talk about who is licensing my music, what content they're using it for, and why does it work for them. In this video, I'm going to answer those questions specifically, so let's get into it. Okay, so the first question is who? Who is using these lo-fi tracks that I'm producing? Well, primarily it's content creators, so like YouTubers, people like myself, just talking about stuff. In fact, you may have already noticed I'm using one of my own tracks underneath this dialogue, and you know, it kind of works. Most of the time, this is how it's typically used, or otherwise, you know, it works well for advertising. I've heard my music being used in many ads when I'm scrolling Instagram as well. TV spots, like not so much. That being said, like looking through my TuneSat placements, there's a ton of use on TV ads and the occasional underscore for like a morning show, even some sports coverage, some pretty random stuff actually. But my lo-fi hip-hop tracks are kind of tailored for this type of usage, and I'll expand on that a bit more in a minute. If I'm pitching music to like a music supervisor for a TV show or to a TV production library, I'm generally not going to send them my lo-fi. And it's not because it's impossible to get lo-fi tracks on TV, but I'd sooner send them material that typically works well for television. And if we're talking hip hop, then I'm sending my like up-tempo, like high energy tracks or something that's leaning more towards like pop or trap, let's say. So let's talk about stylistic approaches. And this is where things get kind of interesting. I tend to throw a lot of different material under the banner of just lo-fi. But there's a really important distinction to make between lo-fi that does well on Spotify playlists and lo-fi that does well on music libraries. I think, to put it bluntly, the type of lo-fi tracks that would get added to like a study beats playlist, for example, or like a sleepy lo-fi playlist on Spotify, they're not going to do well for licensing because as a library composer, we're not writing music to help people study or read. We're writing music, you know, that syncs well for video content. And that typically, not always, but typically means writing in a style that's more energetic and uplifting. Now, for that reason, you might find it interesting to know that despite many pitches to editorial playlists on Spotify, my tracks have never been added to an official Spotify playlist. They've had plenty of love on like user-generated playlists, but I reckon that my tracks aren't necessarily a good fit for some of the more like popular lo-fi playlists out there on Spotify. Why? Well, I wouldn't be entirely surprised if there were like lo-fi hip-hop aficionados out there who like wouldn't even consider my tracks to be lo-fi, and I wouldn't be offended or anything, but they might define it differently. They might define it as something closer to like bedroom pop with like lo-fi aesthetics, or even like soul or R&B with some like lo-fi stylization. And that's all fine and good, you know, if you want to get specific about it, because I'm keenly aware of what works and what doesn't work on music libraries. So here's an example of like polar opposite styles. This is one of my most downloaded tracks on Artlist. And here's something that I'm not even going to pitch to Artlist. In fact, like this one is destined for Spotify only. So no simple transitions, beat is like very chill, everything's super open and minimal, very textural. Sometimes I hear these kinds of tracks on music libraries, but I'm just speaking from personal experience, what I found works well and gets the most downloads. So just a few thoughts to keep in mind. It's always an interesting conversation when folks ask me about this subject. and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Maybe you're watching this and you've been, writing lo-fi material with Spotify in mind primarily, but you're keen to see if it would work for licensing, or maybe it's the other way around. Whatever the case is, hit me up in the comments. Let me know what your thoughts are, and I'd love to hear them. While I'm on the subject, I do actually have a course specifically designed to get you on the fast track to writing licensable lo-fi. This course has helped hundreds of students to better understand the genre, and the best part is I'm using free virtual instruments and samples in the course, which anyone can download. I'll put those links in the description below. Feel free to go check that out. In the meantime, thanks so much for watching, guys. Wishing you all happy composing, and I will see you next time. Peace.